I'm Matthew Kurbis, the subscription attorney, and this is Law Subscribed, your dedicated source for all things subscriptions and the law. Thank you to my sponsors. See links to them in the show notes. Everything discussed is only for educational and entertainment purposes. Enjoy the show. All right. Great. We are live. Welcome to another Law Subscribed Live. I have with me today Jonathan Nessler. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, and so if my audience, if the diehards have been following like everywhere I'm talking, you've already seen Jonathan because he's been one of the panelists for a Legal AI Live. Was it August?
Yeah, that's right.
For August. We've been on two of George Gio Bellis's lunch hour things that he does for the Northwestern Bar Association. But you and I met because we're both on the AI committee that I guess will soon maybe be disbanded. I don't know if I'm supposed to announce that publicly. We're live, ladies and gentlemen, we're live. No, our talents will be put in other places, I think, in the ISBA. But that's where we first met, was through that. So just in case my listeners haven't come across you before, I want to give your background for them.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. My name's John Nessler. I'm a practicing trial attorney. I represent plaintiffs in Springfield, Illinois. I've been interested in technology my whole life. You know, I remember my dad brought home a Mac Classic when I was probably 9 years old, which was a little black and white screen. And I just immediately loved it. Like, it was like, you know, that magic moment where I just instantly got it. And then throughout my childhood and into college, you know, I was always very tech forward. I started to dovetail with the law really around 2015, 2017, when I got really interested in blockchains and crypto. I did a presentation for a group of lawyers on blockchains. And I mean, it was the most well-received CLE presentation I'd ever done. Like, the interest was there, which surprised me because, you know, usually lawyers are always coined as being low tech or slow to adopt, which I think is probably a wrong opinion. And so I got really, really into crypto. I got really, really into artificial intelligence. And, you know, that was a time before generative artificial intelligence, but we were already starting to see kind of your narrow AI applications becoming pretty prevalent throughout the law. And then generative AI hit the scene. And I still remember the first time I interacted with GPT-3. This was just before ChatGPT was released. They released a developer portal that you could access the model with. And it just instantly blew my mind. It was so obvious just working with it one time. What it really reminded me of, Matthew, was the very first time I logged into the internet using a modem. It was a bulletin board back in those days. It had just instantly clicked, like, things are never going to be the same. This is the future. And when I used that generative AI model the very first time, I thought to myself, this is it. You know, this is going to be the most world-changing technology probably since fire. And yeah, I think that that's panning out. You know, I think that we're still at the precipice of it, but it's starting to really, really prove to be correct. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm still very much into crypto and very much into AI. And, you know, I think that there's a very obvious intersection between those two technologies that's going to be necessary to solve, mostly for the downfalls or the pitfalls that are associated with generative artificial intelligence. Most strikingly, how do you know a human did this? Or how do we know what I'm seeing is real? And so that's where I'm spending a lot of my time.
Yeah, well, I think the blockchain stuff is going to be very relevant, and maybe not in like necessarily a cryptocurrency way, but maybe a cryptographic way in this AI abundance world of we're creating all this IP, you know, and how do you go back to like who owns it? Well, a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of your IP maybe was used to train and influence some output. And I really think, and I didn't really get too much into it, Jonathan. I did get into like the metaverse in general, but not necessarily too focused in on blockchain and crypto space. But I learned a little bit about it because there's overlap, of course, in the Venn diagram of metaverse and blockchain, right?
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of overlap. And so like the way I understand the technology with the blockchain tech is like you can have this immutable ledger that you can then verify like through like a crazy hash and like, I mean, look, it's a dirty word now, but like NFTs, it's like a toxic word, but it is like you could have non-fungible tokens to identify your fraction of IP. And maybe even, as I'm just thinking out loud here, the cryptocurrency nature of it could be to reward you for a fraction of a cent, you know, in aggregate, however many times these models were used for like the AI output, right? So like, I actually think And it's curious to know, we talked about some awesome stuff before we went live, ladies and gentlemen. But like, we did not talk about this. So I want to see where this goes. Like, have you thought about that? Because I do think about that sometimes, how blockchain can impact the future of AI and licensing and law and all of that.
I have a lot, but I think you got to kind of go back to first principles with what a blockchain really is, which is essentially cryptographic proof that you own something, okay, or that you created something, which is another way to say that. So you have a private key that anybody who has a public key can cross-reference with your private key to show ownership, okay? And so NFT is actually a really good example of what I'm talking about, just conceptually, in the sense that let's say that the president of the United States had to prove that a video was a video that was released by the White House. In other words, we can't trust any videos that are released because, we were talking about before, technologies like recently released Sora 2 have blown that curve completely out of the water. You can't believe your eyes. You can't believe a picture's a picture. You can't believe a video's a video. So what you can do is, using really the current state of blockchains, is you have a private key as whatever citizen or whatever official you are, and you can use that key to prove this video is me. Okay, so we reverse the model from we believe everything we see because it's a video to we believe nothing we see unless you have proof of ownership or proof of creation of that video. And blockchains are uniquely suited to be not only a really good solution for that, but an ideal solution, because they are, first of all, decentralized. You don't have a company who's controlling it and can be manufactured or it can be altered. They're immutable. So you know that what was reality is always going to be reality moving forward. And they're inspectable. In other words, they're open ledgers, as you pointed out. So anybody can go look to get the proof for themselves. Now you can believe the thing that's being released, because, or not that it's, created by AI, but that the person who created it is holding it out as a creation of theirs. Okay. And so I think that is just such an obvious and beautiful solution to the proof of human that's one of the main problems we're going to run into, is how do we know the thing is created by the human who says they created it or represents the human from that person's point of view? Proof of human is going to be an insanely valuable proposition moving forward. And it's never going to get, any less than right now, right? Like, it's going to be a considerable problem moving forward, and blockchains are the solution.
And look, I was just joking. We were at I think it was a strawberry fest in Long Grove, Illinois, just this past weekend. And there was like a giant pumpkin, like a humongous, like unbelievable giant pumpkin, right? And I joked like, oh, it's AI. Like, oh, no, this is in real life. This is there. But like the implication is we can't even trust what we see maybe in real life, because we have to have such critical thinking about, am I being deceived right now that this thing is real, whether that's proof of human or proof of some kind of reality. I think that's really important. And just if folks are joining us in the middle of this conversation, this is not 2021. This is 2025. Yes, we're talking about blockchain and crypto a little bit, but we're talking about how it relates to AI and how important this relationship is. And even back then, like with the whole George Santos thing, where like he said he went to some schools and he had some degrees, and it turns out he lied about that. And like even just, I thought back then, oh, we could use NFTs and blockchain to verify I went to the school and I went to the, I have this degree and I've achieved this level of certification or whatever, right? But now what you're talking about is taking that same idea, but applying it to, in particular, at trial, right, or evidence before trial, criminal law, civil law, all any sort of litigation that we can actually now verify, or more likely than not, maybe verify that this is a legitimate video that was unaltered because we could follow the hash and we could follow the cryptography and it's secure and all that. And I think that's really important, and not something I'm hearing being talked about in all these AI circles.
Yeah, what you're hitting on is exactly right. I mean, the thing is the nice part about blockchains is, I know we talk in terms of more likely true than not true in civil law, but blockchains are the truth. Like, there is no question, because they're immutable, inalterable. The person, what I hear.
Well, I could spin up another blockchain though that looks exactly like this, that's phrased very closely and similar. So you could make a clone that's a lie, right? Like, so you have to just make sure you're looking at the right chain. Am I right?
Right. You'd have to make sure that's absolutely correct. But, that's solved for the most part. In other words, you can fork a chain, but, the absolute statement of truth that is, for instance, the Bitcoin blockchain. I mean, they say, a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew are all standing in line with one another at a grocery store. they don't agree on much, but they always agree on who has the exact amount of Bitcoin they say they have, right? Because it is that level of truth that no matter how much we disagree about the way we perceive life or our subjective opinions, we can always look at a blockchain and know that that's accurate, right? And so you can.
But to the judges, to the unsophisticated, and it's not, and if it's not Bitcoin, which definitely is its own, thing in the blockchain space,
no question.
like you have to just make sure you're looking at the right blockchain. And like that would be like a very important lesson. Just like today, you don't want to use, a free version of ChatGPT to do legal research. And I would even say don't use it at all. Although the deep research you could find some really good things on there, but I wouldn't exclusively rely on it, right? Like you don't want to, you just want to make sure you're looking at the right place when you're making those decisions.
Yeah, no,
you human error, right. Not blockchain error, human error.
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
But you would have to have a kind of a social agreement on what you would use. But when you take it all the way back to like what you could do with it, let's say that Canon, the camera company, decides on here's the blockchain we're going to use. You could literally, every time you take a picture, it would register within a block. And as you said earlier, you could follow the creation and the accuracy of that picture all the way back to the moment the camera took it. And I think that that's a wild thing to say, but at the same time, I think it becomes really, really necessary because, you could take a photograph right now, you can go to Gemini and you could alter any part of that photograph that you want. And, right now the current standard is, does this photograph fairly and accurately represent the thing it purports to represent? There's no need to have the photographer testify, none of that. And to think about such a loose evidentiary standard that was created in a time that photographs did represent the things they purported to represent, because that's just the state of technology in 1930, right? But now photographs represent a lot of things they don't purport to represent. And, you could think of a million different examples, like the really famous one from 2022, where the Pope was in that puffy white coat. Probably all you people have seen that one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that tricked me, to be honest with you. That's why it always comes to my mind. But that purports to represent the Pope, and it kind of does. But is it real? No, that never happened. And so, the evidentiary standard, I think there's an argument on both sides. But for me, I think we have to start to reevaluate when we allow videos and when we allow photographs into evidence today, let alone in 5 years or in 10 years, because it's the ability to manufacture and manipulate is already reached scale. I mean, it's wild.
Here's talk about a divergent path. I want to talk about divergent, something else, but related. So the other possible future, I would even maybe go to say probable future, than that one is we're all wearing, always listening, or always watching devices that are AI powered, because it's going to give us such enhancement as humans that maybe, we won't need the blockchain tech because we're always going to have all of our recorded everything at all times.
Yeah, so that's another problem that's presented by AI that I think blockchain solve for.
Okay.
and that is the privacy problem. I think you're exactly right that privacy is going to go entirely away. And in some ways that's really unfortunate. Even with like a credit card 5 years ago, your transactions were being recorded, but who in the right mind is going to take the time to look through them all, or who in the right mind is going to, but now we have technology that can parse through all of that, and do it very, very quickly. And so, there was that famous Obama when, what was his name? Snowden, when he, came forward and said, here's what the government's recording. And oh, by the way, it's everything. And he said, yeah, but we don't have time to listen to it all. We just look at the metadata, because who has time to listen to all of your phone calls? And that was kind of accepted as like a acceptable position to take. But now we look at it, it's like AI can listen to all of it and give you a nice little synopsis in the morning of everything that everybody talked about. And, I think that.
And it was looking at keywords. It was looking for keywords back then. And now it's all semantic. It's semantic.
And now it can listen to it all at 100x speed, 1000x speed. And, you've used Notebook LLM as much as anybody that I know. Am I saying that? Is it Notebook LLM? Is that the
Notebook LM is in language
Notebook
model.
LM,
Notebook language model. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you can already take a podcast and instantaneously have the, redact or reduce to text version of that, or have somebody having a conversation about it. And you think about the loss of privacy in the world that you're talking about, where everything that we're talking about is being recorded, uploaded to a server. Everything you see is being uploaded to a server. I just think that I'm not ready to give up all of my privacy. And so, for instance, zero knowledge proofs give you the ability to still maintain some level of privacy in your life if you choose to. And that's kind of the beauty of it is, privacy should be a choice. You should be able to choose to do things privately if you want. And, I think that that's a really important value that humans shouldn't just be willing to trade off for convenience.
It might be a little sci-fi of me, but I do kind of perceive humanity as trying to achieve like a hive mind state. And if you think about language, what is language if not trying to explain to you the thoughts that are in my head?
Yes.
And as a former philosophy major, I actually had my focus in philosophy of language. And I can't remember what it was called, but this theory of language was that we all speak in dialects. So for example, an accent is a different sound using the same overarching language of like the US English language, right? American English. But then a dialect is a subgroup of that. So like a Southern dialect where like bless your heart means something different, in certain places than it does in other places. So this idea of the dialect, well, I can't remember what the concept was. What it was called. I got to look it up. I could probably ask Perplexity. It'll tell me in a second. But we all speak in dialects. There's the John Nessler dialect. There's the Matthew Kurbis dialect. And just by virtue of us being to ask, what do you mean? And like help support this idea that we're all just trying to convey our thoughts from one brain to the next. And so we're trying to achieve this high mind. But if we actually achieve what we're going for, I know there's way more philosophical and sci-fi than we get, usually on Law Subscribe, then we will be giving up privacy entirely. And I think I'm actually okay with that.
Yeah, so I guess 2 points on that. I was a journalism major and a communications major in college. So I actually was very familiar with the exact concept you're talking about, this notion of you have a thought in your mind. What you're doing is essentially encoding it, transmitting it to you, you're decoding it in your mind, and then there's lossiness along the way. In other words, there's no way for me to get the exact precise thought that I have, because language is imperfect and you have distortion or noise in between, to put that exact thought into your head. I'm not ready to do that. I think that there is, I think most art is probably, it exists because of the lossiness. Do you see what I mean? In other words, I'm taking, as the artist, something from my mind and reducing it to writing or reducing it to a painting or reducing it to music. And the interpretation by you is the value of that art. In other words, you can't ask Bob Dylan exactly what one of his songs meant. And if on the off day he decides he's going to tell you exactly what it meant, ever expect to listen to that song the same way again. Because Matthew Kurbis is listening to a Bob Dylan song and thinking to himself, oh, he's probably talking about that girl, or he's probably talking about that thing that happened to me. You're taking his thoughts, the way he encoded them, but you're decoding them in your own way. And, I think what would be lost if we achieve that perfect hive mind is the loss of essentially art in the world, which would be terrible.
So some kind of art, but like, I'll give you a real world example of that. Christopher Nolan, like within the last couple of years, revealed the end of Inception where it cuts to black, and the top is spinning. And I'm pretty sure he's on record saying, in my mind, it fell. He's back in reality. And people were pissed. People were not, everyone who was on the other side of that argument, they were like, no, Christopher Nolan, you wrote and directed that, but you are wrong.
They're sticking to their impression of it regardless of what he's
Right. I mean, it's like anything on the internet, the silent or the vocal minority, right? Like that's the vocal minority. But I think live art like theater, musicals, live performances, orchestras, I don't think that necessarily goes away in a lack of privacy world. I think that, like we still have that. And really, I mean, and we've talked about this privately, that I think that might be, if AI comes, and now we're getting back into the legal profession here and just professions in general, if AI is, and we could argue about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years. But I think you and I do agree on at some point AI is going to make, if it continues to progress and at the exponential rate that it's going, we won't, like, being a lawyer is like not going to be a thing anymore, at least in the way it is today. So like, what do we have left? Like, and that's where I like to go with it. I don't like to like be like a doomer, I'm like, okay, well, what do we have? We have art, we have theater, we have live theater, musicals, things like that. Like, that's where I think if I had a kid going to college today, I'd be like, study the arts. It might be the last thing left that humans find interesting that humans do.
I agree. I do. I couldn't agree more with you, including not limited to the change of our profession. And truthfully, I don't know if I would have said this the same way 6 months, 7 months ago when we first met, but I think that change is already here in the sense that lawyers need to be using these tools today. And if they're not, then they are falling behind. And they may not think they are, but at the same time, like, you have the ability to take maybe a closing argument or a brief and put it into a magic machine and simply say, just type out the words, make this more persuasive. And it will. And, I don't know if you've ever read, I can't remember his name now, and that's all I won't try, Cialdini. There's an author by the last name of Cialdini who wrote a book called Persuasion and then followed it up with a book called Persuasion. That I read both of those, and it will change your mind about how humans actually respond to persuasion techniques versus the absence of persuasion techniques. And, you can't be immune from it. It's just, one example from the book, let me use this because I kind of want to drive home the point that one of the experiments that he ran was people standing in line, and he would send somebody up to the front of the line and he'd say, can I get in front of you? Okay. And maybe 80% of the people said, no, you can't get in front of me. So then they sent the same person up and said, can I get in front of you because my child is in the car and I don't want to leave him out there? Or can I get in front of you because I have an emergency and I have to get to the hospital? And like 90% of the people allowed that person to get in front of them. But what was really interesting about the experiment was the next step. And that was he sent them up with a nonsense reason. And so they would come up and say, can I get in front of you because, my shoes hurt, right? My feet hurt and I'd like to sit down. Or can I get in front of you because I'm just, I whatever followed the because. And what he found was it was still about 90%. So simply by giving a reason to humans, it was more persuasive than without a reason. Just simply giving the because was enough to change a drastic shift in the number of people that allowed the person to come in front of them in line. And so, you take like a small example like that and realize that if you're using appropriate persuasion techniques, then you're going to be more persuasive as a human. You're going to change people's minds at a higher level. And I just think that, to be able to take a brief and say, use Cialdini's persuasion techniques to make this more persuasive, and it will rewrite it for you real time in 5 minutes. And then you've got a more persuasive brief that you can file. How could you keep up with that as an ordinary lawyer who's never studied persuasion? I think it's mind blowing to me that people aren't using these tools already.
Yeah, I don't know if this has happened to you, and I don't see that it happens to many lawyers, but I used to be a very, very serious, stick up my butt rule follower growing up. Like, I did not even try alcohol until I was 21, kind of like very straight edge, serious. And I also might be on the spectrum because I did not understand sarcasm until I was 20 years old in college. Okay. So it could just have been upbringing. I might not be on the spectrum. I kind of think I am, but never tested. And so, and that's political these days. And I'm not trying to be political, but
Tylenol, I think. Was
right.
That
Is all that. I actually have always been more of an Advil person, if I'm being real with you. My whole family was always more Advil than Tylenol. So, where's my train of thought going? So I have become, even after learning the law and realizing everything's made up and the points don't matter, right?
Yeah.
It matters to the extent that we decide that they matter, but objectively, nothing matters. I've become much more silly and relaxed in the days. And I thought of movies and video games when you were talking about art, and I was always more of a gamer, and I would always play the straight edge, good guy, serious, good cop. And then I'm the silliest. If I ever have a chance to play video games, I always pick the most silliest things. So when you were explaining to me that persuasion thing, I'm my current mind of who I am today went to what if you told them I need to get in the front of the line because, and then you say something totally nonsensical, like Jupiter's in the altimeter and these quantum shakes are really making me feel it right now.
Yeah, right. But that was the experiment though, was that as long as you had something after the because, they would let you in front at a 90%
this
rate
guy's
versus
this guy's crazy. Let him go.
Yeah, there's probably that too. Right?
Let's get this guy far away from us.
You need this coffee way more than I need it. You go ahead and get it. No, it's funny you say that though. I had a much different outlook when I was younger from what you described as your youth, but I came to the same conclusion that you came to after practicing law for 20 years now. And I try to explain it to clients you got a strong legal position, as long as the judge, doesn't dismiss the case, we should get past this. Well, you just said I had the winning case. I wrote it because judges can get it wrong, or because, as you framed it, nothing's real. what did there's a personality I follow on X called Riva, and her shtick is everything's a scam. And at first you look at that and you think, nah, but the more I think about it, the more she's right. It's all kind of a scam. It's all a structure put in place by, as Steve Jobs put it, people who are no smarter than you are, right?
It's all just everybody's just trying to achieve a hive mind. I mean, if you think about it.
See, I'm still against the hive mind. Right? So let me ask you this. I'll turn the question around. Elon is coming out with the
Neuralink.
Are you going to get that?
I don't want to get something invasive like that, but I am very interested in some of these non-invasive versions of that, where like you just put something on you and it like could read the brain waves without actually being an invasive chip. I am all for some less invasive version of that. Absolutely, yes.
Can it modify your brain waves, the thing you're talking about?
Yeah, possibly, right? But my brainwaves have been like my thoughts, my neural pathways have been modified my whole life. Like it's a constant state of flux. Like we're always changing. Like any sense of normalcy or continuance is like an illusion, right? Already.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I don't. I don't think I'm ready to put the thing on my head.
I think I would sooner take over it and control the brainwaves of others. That's just I'm gonna
well, yeah,
give myself
obviously.
that.
What are we gonna do today? Well, send things every day, try to take over the world.
Right, of course. And I'm gonna make everybody realize how stupid the billable hour is what I'm gonna do. That's gonna be my first edict as king of all the brains, of all the brainwaves. This billable hour thing is stupid.
We may be able to do that today, to be honest. I think the billable hour is a pretty weak concept nowadays. That it's funny you bring it up. I've been looking a lot into the billable hour and really with the idea that it's going to go away. And when do you think, Matthew, the billable hour really took a stranglehold on the profession? I am curious.
Yeah, it was like the 70s, right? It was like late 60s, like early 70s. So really only a couple generations.
Not very much.
Yeah.
I know. And before that, they had different... And there was
fixed rates set by the bar, mostly.
That's exactly when the time changed, right? So there's the United States Supreme Court case. I don't have it right in front of me, but it essentially said that under a monopoly law, that that bars could no longer set fee schedules like that. And that just changed everything. And they more or less defaulted then to the billable hour, which before I read that, and it was so eye-opening to me, I would have thought the billable hour went all the way back to, when we were wearing wigs, but no. I mean, it is a new concept, and the notion that it's going to last any longer than it's going to last, I think is a little silly,
Let me tell you about the brand new sponsor for Law Subscribed, Paxton. I've been using Paxton as my legal AI tool for over 2 years. I continue to evaluate and demo other legal AI tools in the market and still decide to stick with Paxton because of its reliability, its accuracy, its ease of use, affordability, and they do not lock you into a long-term contract. Now, as a transactional and fractional general counsel attorney, I'm using Paxton for all of my substantive and non-substantive legal work, whether that's legal research, analysis, drafting, or enhancing existing legal work product. In the time it used to take me to draft and analyze legal documents, now, after a little bit of back and forth with Paxton, I have something ready to go in minutes that used to take hours or even days. While I'm no longer a litigator, I could see how valuable Paxton would be when researching a new issue, preparing for a deposition, drafting a motion, or going to trial. So if your firm would benefit from using Paxton as your legal AI tool, then make sure to use the link in the description when signing up to let Paxton know I sent you. That's all about our new sponsor. Now back to the show. And look, like when I explain this to lawyers too, like I say there's a more profitable business model. That's not to say billing hours is not profitable. I mean, obviously, yes, it's profitable. Like lawyers have made millions of dollars, right? Now, is it good for your mental health? Is it good for lawyer retention? Is it good for clients? Some clients, yes, like, insurance companies want to kick the can down the road. Maybe the longer something takes is a good thing. So there are some instances where like, yes, it might be a good thing the longer something takes. But like in 999,999 times, out of a million, faster is almost always better for everyone involved unless you're billing by the hour. And you could charge a lot for it.
I agree with you. I think that one of the things we have to solve for as a profession, once this all goes away, and I'm convinced it will, is, the billable hour has given rise to this kind of pyramid-shaped business model that it has its pros and its cons, but one of the pros that it really has is attorneys, as you know, don't have a residency. It's not like medicine in that way, but we kind of have a de facto residency, especially with the hourly billing model and this kind of pyramid model for operating a law firm, that you hire a ton of associates and they work under partners and they do grueling work, and certainly it's not easy, but at the same time, for those 2, 5, 7 years, they learn how to be lawyers in the same way that a medical resident would learn how to be a surgeon or would learn how to be, a pediatrician. And we don't have that in the absence of that pyramid model. That there is nobody, without the associate, intermediate partner, equity partner model, who's going to train the young lawyers? And another question is, if you have the intermediate partner and the equity partner who's able to spin up, 500, 150 IQ lawyers in the way of a large language model to do the work for them and not hire any of these young associates, where are they going to go? And who's going to train them?
So this might sound crazy, John. Okay, this might sound crazy. And anyone inside the profession is, gets this, and everyone outside the profession is like, "Wait, that's a joke." Law schools,
yeah. I think you have to, though. I do. I think we have to revamp the entire method of educating lawyers, because, it's always had some intern aspect to it, whether it was back in the old days where you could actually get your license by interning with a lawyer for long enough, or as the billable hour became king and the pyramid model of operating law firm became the operative model, then they kind of went away from that and said, no, in fact, you can't even do that anymore. We'll do 3 years of law school. You show you're good enough by passing the bar, and then we expect you'll get your training in this way. Well, we can't have that expectation anymore, because already we're going to start to see fewer associates. We're going to start to see the associates that are within the firm doing different types of tasks. I mean, they're not writing interrogatories anymore. I mean, when you have a large language model that could write you 100 interrogatories, you take your pick, that level of training and thinking is just going to go away. And so I do think we have to figure out a way to train young lawyers, especially the ones coming out of law school today and in the next 5 years, on how to be functioning, practicing lawyers as opposed to JDs. And that's going to be a difficult task, I think.
I have a solution. Are you ready? All right. So first, I'm focused on higher level value, which is lawyers are already using AI and they need a better business model. And so I did announce a couple of weeks ago, I'm starting a legal tech company that's going to help lawyers ditch the billable hour and bill by subscription. So I think that's where I'm focusing a lot of my efforts in the near future. But after that, or during that, or as I'm able to offload me needing to be in that business more and more, I already have a solution that I've been experimenting with my own firm called legalextern.com. Okay?
Yeah, so tell me about that.
So think about externships. You could get credit and or pay at certain institutions. You could get both at law schools. And I was part of allowing that. I was the chair of the law student division for the ABA when we started that fight to allow that. And you're actually working with a law firm while you're doing that, right? So you're in law school, and because here's been my take on everything. Lawyers, politicians, we love to form committees, talk about stuff, and even adopt reports or resolutions and do nothing. So I say, screw it. I'm going to go outside the system and I'm just going to fix it myself. And that's the whole, that's why Law Subscribed was started after I lost an election in the American Bar Association. Because I find if the ABA doesn't want to take up this ditch the billable hour and use the subscription model thing, I will take it up personally, right? And 3.5 years later, sponsored podcast, tens of thousands of downloads, dozens of lawyers I know personally that I have inspired ditch the billable hour and use the subscription model, hundreds who, reach out to, over the years. So I think you can just say, screw the system and figure it out on your own. So legalextern.com, it's just for my firm right now, but I believe you could create a system and people could do it under a different domain if they wanted to go out and try to do this. I think you should have more than one player in this space anyway, where you pair law students with AI-powered small law firms that could use the help, but also teach them how to leverage the tool so that as soon as they're out, they could just start their own AI-powered solo practice law firm. And I know plenty of lawyers who went to law school, got the similar education you and I did, and just hung out a shingle and started practicing and figured it out. So I think you can figure it out, and AI makes it easier than ever to do that before. But an externship that you get credit for to graduate in law school, let's not wait for the law schools to adapt. Let's start externing law students today.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Do you mind me asking, when did you graduate law school?
2014.
Yeah, it's interesting the difference my age group was before the kind of economic collapse of really the pyramid model. And all of my friends, not one of them opened their own law firm. Like they all joined firms, every single one of them that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if maybe that collapse changed, within that small number of years. It's only 7 years between, that there's more who are hanging a shingle. I think that's why I'm apprehensive to believe that the future of the practice of law is going to be individuals taking on the risk of opening their own thing, AI powered though it may be. I don't know. I'm a little apprehensive to think that that's the future of it, but maybe it is. Maybe things have changed that much already.
Maybe if they could do a few externships at 3 different law firms throughout law school, right? Maybe then they've seen it. They've seen how the sausage gets made, right? They've actually worked on real client matters, right? Like while they were in law school.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to conceptualize this. So the law student goes to the externship website and picks tasks that they want to perform.
So no, it's a placement program, right? So it's like, so right now, if you go to legalextern.com, it's set up. There's the form for the law student to fill out. Now, this is just for my firm, to pair an extern with my firm. But I think you can set this up to pair an extern with any law firm that's willing to participate. So I could add a third form. So right now there's 2 forms. Very simple. Law student form, law school form. Because every law school, while they have the bare minimum requirements to comply with the rules and standards to be accredited, they all have their own requirements of what's needed to get field placement or externship credit towards your JD. And so they need to fill out their information. And then the law student needs to say, well, I'm interested in, being an extern for your firm or for a firm, if you expand it. And then I can make a third form that says, I'm a law firm, and I'm willing to not just try to get some free help, but actually do teaching. Because in order for it to qualify as an externship and get credit towards your JD, you can't be making copies. You have to be doing just as close as you can to just substantive legal work. Not necessarily provide legal services and give legal advice to a client because you're not licensed, but everything up to that line. And then you have to talk about it with a lawyer or legal professional at that firm to learn about it. And I think that benefits law firms too and lawyers too, because like you and I know, we do teaching. The more we teach and talk about it, the more we learn about it and we get good questions, and that makes us think. And so it only makes the lawyers be better lawyers when they have to think about, metacognition, right? Thinking about thinking.
This is exactly the problem. Yeah. Everything you're saying, that's an interesting solution. How many people have you had do work?
I have had hundreds of applicants, which is crazy, man. It's hard. And like so many law schools have all these different requirements. Like I almost worked with this guy in North Carolina, very impressive application. But like this law school required me to like come in person once a month. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen. I'm in Illinois, right? So actually I'm taking a renewed focus just on Chicago area law schools because that's where I'm located. And I actually kind of might like to get together with my extern in person. So it's still been very much an experiment, right? And now that I have this other business that I've started, I'm going to need to actually hire an extern sooner rather than later. And I also used to, did you ever work for other small firms or other attorneys before you had your own thing?
No, it's a family practice.
Okay, so you came more for the family.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So no, I mean, I worked in a cigar store, but I don't think that's what you're asking.
well, no. So the reason why is
as far as the law, no.
Every lawyer I ever worked for, except for my last firm that I was at, because it was more of a partnership, was just they owned the firm, law offices of this lawyer, right?
Yes.
And there were other lawyers that worked there, but it was their shop, and they would joke, "You're only going to leave me." I teach you all these things, I pay you all this money, and then you leave. They always leave. And so they didn't invest too much because they always left. But part of me thought, well, if you were your own firm owner, this goes back to my philosophy background, Kant's categorical imperative. You impose on all others that they should make the choices you're making, right? Which is why you shouldn't lie and some other things. But anyway, so if you own your own firm, just by virtue of owning your own firm and running your own business and the benefits that come with that, you're sort of implying to your lawyers who are working for you, hey, one day you should do this too. You should do this too. So the externship idea actually also sort of stemmed from this idea that they're just going to leave me and start their own practice because I'm going to teach them how to do it anyway. So why hire lawyers, hire law students so that the moment they graduate, they could go off and do it. And you get a new extern every semester and over the summer, right? So 3 externs a year. Again, it's still very in experimentation phase. It hasn't come to fruition yet. But the idea is you get a new one every semester. And like you get fresh ideas, you teach them new things, there are new things being taught, and then you get fresh eyes on all your stuff, whenever. Now, of course, and it's live. You go to Legal Extern when we're done, legalextern.com, and see, like, it basically says must use AI, right? Like must be interested in and already currently using AI. And
Yes.
like I've gotten the worst applications where people are like, oh, I want to be an intellectual property lawyer. That's not what this is, right? I get a lot of international, and frankly, I get lawyers who apply, and they're like, oh, I would love to learn from you. It's like, well, like that's not
Pretty cool.
that's not what this is. That's not what this program is for, right? Like, listen to my podcast. Like, that's for you, right? But like,
Yes.
so anyway, I think I'm trying to solve the problem of by hiring lawyers to work for me that might eventually just go off and leave and start their own practice anyway. A buddy of mine who just worked for a large nursing home firm, now, on the plaintiff side, just started his own practice, right? So like it happens all the time. So why pretend? Why pretend like these lawyers are going to stay? Just hire an extern every semester and get a lot of valuable work from them, but also teach them a lot, improve yourself by teaching them, and then they can go off and I see a world of abundance. I know, that's going to maybe change, in the near future with AI. Again, you and I disagree on the time horizon there, but I see, for the next 10 to 20 years, that there's going to be this massive latent legal market opportunity that I'm not worried about training the next lawyer who's in my backyard, because I only need 30, 40 good clients on the subscription model. Maybe not even, maybe only 20 if I charge the right amount. And like, I can't, like, there's plenty of clients out there, I think.
No, there are. And it's not that I don't see the world of abundance. I do. I would like to clarify that point. Like, it's just
legal client abundance, law firm client abundance. How about that?
That's it. I mean, I have a hard time believing that once we reach a certain point, you know what the singularity is. So we'll just call it the legal singularity.
Sure.
And, so the listeners understand that we reach a point to where, in this legal singularity example, that you're able to essentially spin up an instance of an attorney with 150 IQ who is fully capable, this model, of acting and thinking like a practicing attorney. Okay, not there yet, certainly. But when we get there, you realize if you can spin up one, you can spin up 100, you can spin up 1,000, you can spin up 10,000. And so when you have, 10,000 150 IQ lawyers capable of performing work for a penny an hour, I just have a hard time understanding how demand's not eventually going to peter out, right? Be met. Let's phrase it that way, because there's only so much demand. I mean, there's only so much demand for legal work, and I don't know that it's infinite.
How many flavors of ice cream are there? How many manufacturers of ice cream are there? I'm just saying people like to choose a different flavor, and I'm not one, but any trademark attorney would tell you, a brand, baby, it's the power of the brand. Why? And
I agree.
And I'm with you up to a certain extent, right, on this. But I think that what we do is we're turning legal services into software, right? Ultimately, right? So like, how are we currently paying for software? Like, I pay Calendly $120 a year, and I use it. I am a power user, right, of Calendly. I mean, I have like 40 event types. Like, it's wild, right? I have minimum one meeting a day on average scheduled through just my calendar stuff throughout the whole year, and automated and rescheduled. Superpower user. It costs them way less per year to provide me that software solution that I'm getting incredible value from. Probably because they're at scale now, it's probably almost 100% profit, so like 99.99% profit. So you have incredibly high margins in the software space. You just can't charge by the hour, which is like what comes back to the theme of the podcast, right? Like you're right. A penny an hour doesn't make any sense to charge that way. You can charge $100 a month for access to that AI-powered lawyer of one of the 1,000 that the Nessler firm has created, right? So like, I still think there's like, we could create moats around our brand, and maybe we have a special flavor of the ice cream, like we sprinkle in toffee or whatever the equivalent is. Maybe all my, contracts are a little bit more friendly, or funny than like the other contracts that are being automatically drafted by AI. Because I've trained my AI, I'm the human, to do that. So I think we'll still see lawyers. It will just be radically different than it is today.
Yeah, there's a couple parts of that I really agree with. One, the allusion to the value add. It's going to become super significant. Why choose my firm over some other firm when you could get essentially the same product for free in this world of, almost infinite supply of competent legal help? But, the software example, I think is a good example, but I do want to push back a little bit.
Yeah.
That Calendly, is that what it is? Calendly?
Calendly.
Calendly. How many people do they employ?
I think it's around 300 to 400. It's not, they're a private company, but it's hundreds. Yeah.
And they're the top dog in that market. I've heard of them before. I mean, they're one of 4 or 5.
It's how you scheduled this LinkedIn Live with me.
Yeah, which was great, by the way. It really was. And in the email I got yesterday reminded me about it. It was all great.
All
really,
automated,
really
right?
Yeah.
Like
No,
set
it was
it
really
and
well
forget
done.
it, right? Yeah.
Really well done. But I think that, when you look at a company like that in the 4 or 5, let's say 10 competitors, all employing 400 to 500 people in order to run that operation, because software is really running the operation, not the people, but the people are there to make sure the software. So now think of how many lawyers exist in the United States, right?
1.3
and how
million.
and how many new lawyers are coming into the market. And so that, I think, is the other side of the component that I'm going to push back on, is that we have so many lawyers that the demand won't keep up with the supply of lawyers once we have an infinite supply of competent legal help outside of meeting a human being, right? So I do think that a large law firm, maybe a law firm with, let's say, 1,000, and these are the best lawyers, right? The guys who can handle, without technology help, maybe 150 cases. Now with technology and with, competent AI, they can handle an order of magnitude more, 2 orders of magnitude more. And so, you get these firms that are just small numbers of lawyers, comparatively speaking, to the entire market. And so where is everybody else going to go? You know what I mean? In other words, there's so many lawyers that once we provide infinite competent legal help, I just don't see the profession being the size that it is now. It won't need to be. And maybe we're saying the same thing there, but at the same time, it's going to be a jolting change, for the next 10 years before we reach whatever plateau, if it ever does plateau.
I think that there may be a tipping point, and it's hard to predict when that's going to be. But if everyone, I don't know if you're watching this live or in the near future, I'll be speaking at Max LawCon in Tennessee, in Nashville, Tennessee, in October. I think on the 10th I'm talking. And I'm talking about the latent legal market. And what it really boils down to is $400 billion was spent on U.S. legal services in 2024. But we know only 23% of the market's being served because of research by the World Justice Project, right? So that means 77% of the market. That represents a potential $1.3 trillion market opportunity using mostly billable hours. So it could be like a $2 trillion market opportunity, and that 77% represents people who know they have a legal problem. What about all the people that have legal problems that don't know it, but with AI and subscriptions, we're able to help bring them up? I had 4 clients schedule calls with me this week, and we're only on Tuesday, so that was yesterday on Monday, that when they said, how did you find out about me? They all put ChatGPT, right?
Yeah,
so,
well, I actually had my first client find me on Grok.
There you go, right?
2 weeks ago. It was great, yeah.
So this is going to happen more and more, where they're using these AI tools, and they're like, oh, shoot, it's a legal thing. The AI is telling me to hire a lawyer. Here we are.
And I think about what you're saying, and but would we agree, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that a huge portion of this pent up demand is because they can't afford current prices? Is that right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's not even that. So yes, and they could afford, maybe they could afford a lot, but they need pricing certainty.
And so I guess the next step of that question is, why wouldn't they go with the free model? In other words, we will
They
see.
are. It's called ChatGPT and Perplexity.
Yeah, right. And so once we get, let's see, hyper curated legal models that are running outside of the United States. I understand that this would be prohibited by the unlicensed practice of law, but the ABA has no power in Jamaica. And
Right.
So you set up a server there and you're running this AI model. I feel like almost, well, not almost all, I won't say it that way, but I would say a significant amount of the pent up demand is going to go immediately to the free models, and they're going to essentially represent themselves using the help of an AI. And so I still don't see how that flushes over into supporting lawyers financially. You see what I mean? In other words, that's kind of where the disconnect is you're talking about a world with infinite legal help.
I could use
for next to
TurboTax.
free.
I could use TurboTax,
You can,
right?
that's
Or I
true.
could hire a CPA firm, right? And because I have 2 businesses, technically I have 3 now, right? My wife is a W-2 employee, right? And like my taxes are more complicated. Sure, I could do it myself in TurboTax, but guess what? My highest value time is not spent helping myself and doing it myself. It's spent outsourcing that, to like a professional, to an expert. And now I could spend more higher value time doing the things that actually matter to me or generate me money in my business. So I just don't see people doing it themselves because they have better things to do. And my law firm, like one of my marketing copy for my firm, Subscription Attorney LLC, is get back to what you enjoy in your life and business, right? Like stop doing legal by yourself.
But how will that, again, I think that the pent-up demand, you're not the pent-up demand in the legal market. It's so, it's not going to magically make people who can't afford legal help suddenly be able to afford it at a price that lawyers are going to be willing to perform. And I think that still comes into my
I think they will. I think they
extent.
will. I am literally staking my next career move. I mean, it's not really a move because I'm still practicing law and having a podcast, but on like helping lawyers get to that point because they just don't know. It's not that they don't want to, it's that they don't know. And we lawyers fear the unknown and we overanalyze everything. It's like, no, just get out there and build the ship as you're sailing it. It's okay. You'll make it from point A to point B. You'll sail from shore to shore. You're smart. You're a lawyer.
I still don't see it. In other words,
I charge $20 a month and $50 a page. People could afford that, and I'm profitable.
Yeah, that's I believe that. I do.
And they pay more money if they have higher volume versus if they just subscribe at $1,000 or $2,000 a month. They no longer pay per page, and they're getting greater value for that because of that, right? And so then I work on so many legal projects a month. So they actually, if they could afford the $1,000 or $2,000 a month, in particular, that's for small business owners, and they all can. Believe me, small businesses can afford $1,000, $2,000 a month. Now, like they could make multiples of that back, right? And it would cost them more to pay me per page. So I'm actually saving them money. When they pay me more money, I am saving them money. So I think the business model does work to solve this problem if you have a common sense subscription-based business model. I think it always does, and even in litigation, right? Stage 1, pre-discovery, X amount a month. We start entering discovery, X times 2. Enter, expert discovery pre-trial, X times 3. Trial starts, X times 4, right? Or maybe you have a per diem or a per weekly subscription at that point, depending on the nature of it, right? So like you got subscription tiers for everything, man. And it's just crystal clear. Clients understand it. They can budget for it. They know approximately when a stage is going to happen. And you, the lawyer, want to get to that next stage faster because you start making more money. And so the case progresses to end faster. So I think subscription model solves all the problems.
I think contingency fee solves pretty much all the problems you just described in the sense that anybody can afford that as long as it's successful, and the lawyer definitely has the drive to get the case done as soon as possible.
The lawyers on the other side, though, you have an inherent conflict with the lawyers who are billing by the hour when you're a contingency fee lawyer.
You do.
So imagine
if
they were doing the subscription model that I just described. So I don't think necessarily the contingency model goes away, although I do think you could offer white glove service to contingency fee clients who are willing to pay $100 or $200 a month, where you're able to maybe do more stuff, and instead of taking a third, you take 20%, right? Because now you've got guaranteed revenue, they've got skin in the game, and the likelihood that they take a good settlement goes up because they're going to pay for trial expenses up front and $200 a month or whatever, right? So I still think that you're going to see disruption in contingency space, but absolutely yes. Of course, I agree. Contingency aligns incentives. We just got to get the attorneys on the other side to stop billing by the hour.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that part. I've got to think through your course with the subscription model and how that solves for the current outstanding need for legal representation. I think it's a curious solution, but again, I'll have to think through it before I give any more thoughts on it.
And so as
You obviously have thought about it a lot and have built your life around it, and it's great.
right. So just like wrapping up the conversation here, you want to tell my audience about, other, so like, yes, you're a trial lawyer, you're a personal injury attorney, work at the family firm in Springfield, but like you're working on some other cool stuff. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I have a company called Integrated Cognition. It kind of started as a way for helping ordinary people use AI. And, I think that the learning curve to use artificial intelligence, while it's not astonishingly high, to use it well can be. And, the difference between somebody who's very, very capable at using a large language model versus somebody who's not is a league of difference. And so that was kind of initially what I came out with. I released an app that, essentially uses background prompting and system prompts in order to help get better results. That's AI Artisan. And that's been out now for 3 years. It's been great. It's been, I think, pretty well received. And then I'm writing a book called Infinite Counsel, which essentially kind of the hope is to articulate what a world looks like, what the economics of a law practice looks like in a world where we do have an infinite supply of competent legal help. And so I'm really starting at a first principles or grassroots kind of level where I'm talking through what the practice of law and the economics of running a practice looks like now, what the current state of technology allows for, and then what I would project, the next 10 years is going to bring, and how a law firm can be ready to be prepared for that, what's coming. And, I think that this podcast is a great resource for that. The idea, it's so interesting to me because, I haven't known you for 6 or 7 months, but I think a lot about your model and how, like, you couldn't have a more perfect time for a model like yours than today. Like, you literally have to have the type of creativity and model. And I'm not just saying that to blow smoke at you, but at the same time, I mean it. Like, you couldn't be better situated. In fact, I was talking to Gio today a little bit about you, but also he's doing one of his lunch and learns about different billing models because he sees it coming. Gio, he saw the last trend of technology coming, seeing the future trend of technology coming in. Like, you're suited for it already. And so the book in part is to try to convince people, lawyers, that they need to take on different models because billing by the hour and the pyramid model isn't going to work anymore. And as a profession, that's going to cause a lot of different problems, not the least of which, how are you going to train our associates? And we need to solve for the broader professional problems, but also solve for the individual, as me, the professional, how am I going to maintain the practice of law in a world where you have an infinite supply of competent legal help for next to free. And so that's the idea behind it.
Yeah. I mean, check your email for the Zelle. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
but I will say, like, I've been preaching this since I've been thinking about it since 2018. I've been preaching it since 2020, and I've been practicing it since March of 2022. But because of this podcast, I mean, I've talked to lawyers that, like, no joke, one for like 30 years has just been using the subscription model. Now, he didn't call it that, right?
Yes.
Like, he just called it like a monthly retainer, But like, lawyers have been doing this for a long time. Just like and also nobody's been doing it the way I'm doing it. Because one of the benefits of having this podcast and thinking about it all the time is I've been able, and listeners who've listened to every episode, we could filter through all the experiences of lawyers who for decades have not billed by the hour, have used fixed fees or some version of a recurring fixed fee, whatever they call it. And like, I've designed my model based on all the lessons and also a lot of what's outside of law in the software space, the subscription economy, the membership economy, like all of that, right? So like, I take a lot of what's outside the profession, apply to what's worked in the profession, what I've learned from other people, and I designed my unique model around that. And I it took a couple of years of the pod, but I have copycats, and I'm so happy for it because that means it doesn't just work for me; it's working for other law firms too. And so, yeah, the hope is other law firms can do this too. And again, we may disagree on timing, but I agree with the premise of your book. I just don't know when that's going to happen. And my hope is, here's my hope, that whether it's, again, 5, 10, 20 years, whatever, by then we may be living in a world of abundance, and we won't work because we have to. We'll work because we want to, and then it won't matter.
I actually agree with you on that point 100%. But however this goes, the end result will be an abundant world, I hope it's not a totalitarian abundance in the sense that it's, you always have to keep in mind the negative side of these technologies. And one of the negative sides is it will be able to watch and adapt to everything we do at all times. And, you have to try to safeguard against that while also allowing for the other. And yeah, I think that what you're doing is great. I love that you remind me of this guy when I was getting into SEO back in 2015, trying to run the company website and all of that, named Neil Patel, who his whole thing was, I'm just going to give you the knowledge for free. And if you want more, then, come ask. And I learned so much from him, and I in turn learned a lot from you. And I would leave your listeners with that, listen to this man, because he's giving you ideas about what you're going to need to do in order to have an economically prosperous law firm moving forward. The old models are going to shatter. There's just no question about that.
Well, I've got some great clips for the podcast. Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, no problem.
If people wanted to follow up with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can find it. X is my platform of choice. I am at JT Nessler. That's JTNESSLER on X. I don't post a lot from that account. I have an anonymous account that I can shit post from, and have more fun on Twitter than that one. But if you want to DM me there, they're open, and that's the easiest way to go.
All right, great. Well, we have to vamp because there's 30 seconds delay on LinkedIn. So I'll just say Jonathan and I are also both on LinkedIn. So go and follow him on X and then follow him on LinkedIn. In particular, I'm not on, I have maybe this is not an exaggeration, over 50 handles on all the other social media platforms for all the brands and the business ideas and things that I have.
I know exactly what you mean.
Right. I think my passwords app now is up to 700 something different passwords. Now that includes my spouse, that includes my wife, but she's 50 and I'm the other 650. But I really only post on LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn's the best place to get in touch with me. Click that bell, click all so you see all the posts. Don't just rely on the algorithm, whether that's X or LinkedIn or wherever, right? If you care about the content people are putting out, there are usually ways that you could guarantee you get notifications when they post. So definitely take advantage of that. So Jonathan, stick around. We are caught up now on LinkedIn. And for those of you who tuned in live, I know we had almost a dozen, I think, come in and out throughout. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. So stick around, Jonathan. Hold on.
Thanks, everybody.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Make someone's day by sharing this episode with them. The best way to get in touch is to follow and message me on LinkedIn. To get extra content, subscribe to the newsletter at www.lawsubscribe.com, where you can also become a paid subscriber to get episodes and content early. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.